At the gala, a strange man took my wife from me and walked away with her through the back door, and when I caught up with them, her face paled as if the ground had disappeared. "The divorce will be signed tomorrow," I announced, pain hiding behind my firmness. I didn't wait for an answer, I just left. She later discovered that the man didn't want commitment, just a fleeting thrill. Alone, she tried to fix what was irreversible. I, little by little, rebuilt my life alongside a new love, someone who chooses me every day with loyalty and respect. Months later, my ex came to me in tears, but it was too late. I forgave to move on lightly, not to relive what was broken. Each followed their own path, marked by their own choices. There's no way to accurately describe what I felt when I saw the scene. My wife, with whom I'd slept for 7 years, with whom I'd shared the same roof, the same bed, the same pains and joys, being led by another man, smiling as if she'd freed herself from a prison. She didn't see me right away, but I saw them. I saw his hands on her waist, I saw his fingers intertwined with hers, I saw the way she tilted her head when he whispered something in her ear. For a moment, I thought it was a joke, a misunderstanding, a hallucination caused by unfounded jealousy or mental fatigue. But then she turned her face toward me and froze. That expression, it wasn't guilt, it wasn't regret. It was fear. As if, right then and there, she realized what she'd just done. As if she hadn't calculated that I would see it. As if she thought she could walk out of my life without saying a word and without having to pay anything. It was that night, amid the warm lights of the party, the muffled sound of jazz playing in the hall, and the clinking of glasses in the hands of the guests, that everything inside me shattered. What was once love turned to rubble. What was once desire turned to ice. What was once care became a stone wall. I looked at her like someone dead, soulless, with no return. And all I could say, fighting the lump in my throat and the urge to beg for some justification that made sense, was that the divorce would be signed the next day. She tried to tell me something, but I wouldn't listen. I already knew that no words from her would heal what was breaking there. Because when trust is gone, love has nowhere to rest. In the days that followed, there were no explanations. No messages, no calls. Just silence. And in the silence, I discovered the worst pain of all, that of not even being worth trying to win her back. I was just the man left behind. The stable one. The predictable one. The one who provided security, but not thrills. The one who delivered routine, but not a storm. And she, apparently, wanted chaos. He'd chosen a stranger for the promise of a fleeting thrill. He'd thrown away years of history for a moment of vertigo. What she may not have known, or forgotten, is that chaos exacts a heavy toll. And it doesn't accept returns. Little by little, the news spread. She and the man had traveled together, disappeared for weeks, posting photos in places we'd one day planned to visit. The most ironic thing? She wore the dresses I'd helped her choose, the same ones I'd bought on our trips, the same ones she swore were special because they were linked to our memories. But now, those memories were of her with another man. As if everything had been recycled, as if I'd been just a rehearsal for the main show. While she ran for adrenaline, I relearned how to stand alone. I discovered that silence, even piercing, can be fertile. I started going out more, breathing without the weight of a marriage that was already dragging on with omissions and lies that, at the time, I pretended not to see. And then, unexpectedly, someone appeared. Someone who didn't ask for promises or fake smiles. Someone who didn't need games to feel alive. This woman, sweet, firm, present, looked at me with a kind of truth I hadn't known existed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tolerated. I felt chosen. The contrast between the two became brutal. Over time, my ex reappeared. And it was with tears. With apologies. With a plea for her return. She said the other man was gone, that it was all just a stupid impulse. She said she felt empty, that the nights were now too long, and the days meaningless. She said she couldn't eat properly or sleep anymore, that everything she did reminded her of me, of our life, the smell of our house, the sound of my laughter, the messages I left on the steamy mirrors after showers. He begged for a chance. He wanted to rebuild. He wanted to come home. But home was no longer hers. While she was searching for thrills, I was rebuilding a bridge within myself. She wanted to return to something that no longer existed. Because I was no longer the same. The love I once felt for her died the exact moment she decided a stranger was worth more than our past. And no matter how much she begs, cries, or claims she's learned, there are wounds that can't be healed with words. There are losses that are permanent. The last time we saw each other, she stared at me with red eyes and a choked voice, trying to convince me that I was still the love of her life. I just smiled serenely and said, "I forgive you. But I'm not coming back." There was no scandal. There was no shouting. Only silence, again, now charged with a certainty, she had lost everything. And that loss didn't come from me. It came from her choice. The bitterest part of all isn't the end. It's what remains afterward. It's looking back and realizing that this wasn't a marriage in crisis. It was someone who chose not to love me anymore. Who believed what we had was disposable. And that illusion, that recklessness, cost me dearly. Because now, by my side, there's someone who chooses me every day. And not because they need to. But because they want to. Because you see value where I was once devalued. Because you see the man I was, who I've become, and who I'm still becoming. The curious thing is that, years ago, when we got married, she promised to be my partner through thick and thin. In sickness and in health. In joy and in sorrow. But when everyday life arrived, she grew bored. She wanted to escape stability as if it were a punishment. She wanted to feel again what she feels at the beginning of a romance, ignoring that true love doesn't live on beginnings, it lives on permanence. I moved on. And she remained trapped in her own choices. That's why, to this day, she comes back. She texts. Sometimes she calls. She says she still loves me. That she dreams of me. That she can't accept the way it all ended. But it's too late. And the most tragic thing is that, deep down, she knows it. She knows she threw away the only man who ever truly loved her. She knows that, on a whim, she lost what many people spend their entire lives searching for. What she doesn't know, what she still doesn't understand, is that her love for me may have only truly begun the day she lost me. And that the greatest punishment isn't being hated. It's being forgotten. And what happened to her after that, well, that part, no one could have imagined. Welcome to the channel. Here, no form of cheating is romanticized or supported, the stories you'll hear are fictional, but based on real emotions, created to show how infidelity can destroy lives, homes, and hearts. Our purpose is clear, to expose the consequences of wrong choices and to value loyal, true, and reciprocal love. Get ready now. You are about to hear a story shocking. Good story. His name was Daniel, hers was Emily. They married young, not on impulse, but out of a certainty that seemed too solid to question. They were the kind of couple who exude partnership, not in exaggerated public kisses or constant declarations on social media, but in comfortable silences, knowing glances, and gestures that betrayed years of intimacy. They lived in a two-story house with a white facade and dark wooden windows, surrounded by a small hedge of flowers that Emily tended zealously, even after long days at the hospital where she worked as a physical therapist. Daniel, on the other hand, was an engineer and dedicated his hours to projects that often left him spending entire nights adjusting spreadsheets or reviewing calculations in the makeshift office he'd set up in the back bedroom. Still, he always found time to make her breakfast on Sundays, just the way she liked it, lightly browned toast, soft scrambled eggs, and not too hot milk. Emily had a serene beauty. She was one of those women whose presence didn't scream, but filled. She had brown eyes that changed color depending on the light, and a quiet smile that always seemed to hold something unsaid. Daniel watched her attentively even after years together, as if never tiring of deciphering details. In return, she admired him with a discreet devotion that revealed itself in small things, sorting his shirts by color, leaving hidden notes in his backpack with short, sweet phrases, keeping his car clean, even if it meant waking up earlier on her days off. Their routine was marked by balance, by a tranquility built over time, based on mutual concessions and quiet respect. They weren't perfect, they knew that. They sometimes fought over small things, the forgotten dishes, the forgotten date, the difference in how they dealt with fatigue, but there was always a way forward, a bridge, an apology that was quick to arrive. Their marriage seemed solid to everyone, but especially to their own eyes. They shared a common circle of friends, frequented the same places, and spoke naturally about the future. On their wedding anniversaries, they exchanged handwritten letters instead of gifts, a ritual she started and he maintained with genuine emotion. In these letters, they didn't promise each other the world, they thanked each other for the small, everyday struggles. A quote of hers once resonated with Daniel: "Maybe love isn't what we feel at first, but what we choose to hold on to when everything grows lukewarm." He believed it. Emily did too, or at least it seemed. There was something truly beautiful about the way they built their life together. There were no excesses, no luxuries, just the necessary comfort and the constant pursuit of emotional and financial stability. Together, they overcame the grief of his father, the lengthy treatment for her depression, and the frustration of 3 years of unsuccessfully trying to conceive. They didn't give up on each other, even when everything seemed slow, heavy, or frustrating. There were never promises of incessant passion, but there was always surrender. At night, they watched TV shows on the couch with their feet intertwined, shared blankets, and napped in each other's arms. Their complicity was more tangible than visible. And perhaps for that very reason, rarer. Emily was observant, detail-oriented, deeply sensitive to changes in tone, to silences that lasted longer than usual. She knew when Daniel came home more tired, when he hit a work problem to spare her, when he said, "It's okay," with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She sensed it, but didn't always confront it. She kept it to herself, organized it mentally, waited for the right moment to bring up the subject. Daniel was more objective, more practical. He didn't dwell too much on feelings, but he didn't let them be ignored. When she acted strange, he noticed. When she cried in secret in the bathroom, he waited, knocked on the door, and hugged her silently when she opened it. Theirs was a connection built on what wasn't said out loud. And for many years, that was enough. Their social life was active, but not excessive. They attended dinners, birthdays, get-togethers with college friends, and Sunday walks in the park. They were discreet but present. They planned to travel to Europe for their next vacation and were saving for it. They kept in a box their tickets from previous trips, their developed photos from an era without filters and instant captions, their museum and theater tickets. Daniel loved cinema, Emily liked painting. They shared their tastes and learned to appreciate what the other loved. She took him to contemporary art exhibitions he would never have understood on his own. He introduced her to black and white films, which she previously found too slow. They transformed. They molded themselves to each other without ceasing to be themselves. It was a love that grew through patience. On their wedding anniversaries, they traveled to simple places, far from the big cities. They enjoyed the basics, sleeping in, holding hands on unfamiliar streets, stopping for leisurely coffee. Daniel was the guy who always carried an old camera and captured random moments. Emily made albums with these recordings. They called it "Our Edited Memories," because they chose to keep only the good things. When they returned to reality, they faced the weight of bills, deadlines, and demands, but always with the promise that, on the next holiday, there would be rest. And love. The connection between them was so palpable that even their closest friends said that if they ever separated, it would be because the world had fallen apart. Daniel was never a man of grand speeches. He showed his love through his actions. He took turns doing household chores, listened attentively to her daily stories, and took care of the little details. When she was sick, he made soup just the way she liked it, cancelled appointments to be close by. When she wanted to vent about a difficult patient or an insufferable coworker, he put down his phone, closed his laptop, and looked directly into her eyes. Emily reciprocated with constant kindness. She knew every part of his body, every quirk, every preference. She knew the right song to play when he was in a bad mood. She knew the clothes he liked to see her in. She knew the exact amount of sugar he put in his coffee. And yet, there was room for mystery. There was still that delightful surprise of discovering something new, even after years. Their home was a reflection of their relationship, welcoming, balanced, with traces of both in the details. She had picture frames with quotes on the walls, plants in every corner, books organized by color. He had shelves with movies, action figures, and old records. They had a dog named Blue, who slept at the foot of the bed and barked every time they hugged for longer, as if demanding attention. Blue was an anniversary gift Daniel gave Emily on their 5th anniversary, saying he wanted someone else to share the love that was already overflowing. Emily cried that day. And in that moment, everything felt right. Everything felt eternal. But time, silent and treacherous, has its own plans. And no matter how solid the foundation seems, cracks can appear where least expected. Small departures, small choices, small absences. Nothing that, on its own, can bring down a story. But, combined, they can crumble what was thought to be unbreakable. And it is precisely at this point in history that everything begins to change. Still subtly, still imperceptible to those observing from the outside. But deep inside, the first stirrings were already happening. And neither Daniel, with all his attention to detail, nor Emily, with all her sensitivity to silence, were able to notice. At least, not in time. It was supposed to be just another Saturday night. One of those company events Daniel was already accustomed to attending with Emily. She always paid attention to the details when they went to parties like this, the dress chosen weeks in advance, the rehearsed makeup, the light perfume he loved. He, more reserved, wore the same tailored suit and smiled discreetly, simply following along, as he always did. That night, however, was different. Emily seemed restless, checking her phone excessively, nervously running her hand through her hair, and drinking her wine faster than usual. Daniel noticed. As someone who'd learned to read between the lines, he sensed it. But he didn't ask anything. He was tired of insisting on conversations that she always ended with an "it's okay," that meant absolutely nothing. As they chatted with acquaintances and greeted colleagues, Emily gradually distanced herself. She pretended not to. She went to the bathroom, then to the dessert table, then said she needed air. Daniel watched in silence, trying to find a reason for her behavior. Until it happened. A tall man with an easy smile and a flamboyant presence approached her. There was no kiss, no inappropriate touching. But that look betrayed what no gesture dared to reveal. Daniel didn't know the man. And in that moment, he knew his wife did. She followed them with her eyes, then with her steps. She watched as they walked away to the side of the room, as if searching for a quieter corner. And she followed. Not out of distrust, but instinct. Because of a pain that began to throb in her chest like something old resurfacing. When she turned the corner, she saw them both at the back door. She was smiling, but it was a strained smile. He was saying something quietly, and she shook her head, as if fighting an inner doubt. And then, without thinking, Daniel called out to them. She turned. And the world, in that instant, collapsed inside her. Emily paled. The glass in her hand trembled. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't ask anything. He simply said, his voice firm, restrained, and filled with pain, "The divorce will be signed on Monday." There was no room for excuses, no justifications. She tried to get closer, but he backed away. Not because he hated her, but because something inside him had died. And there's no way to stay where you die a little every day. She didn't look for him in the following weeks. Silence fell over the house. Her clothes were removed from the closets. The picture frames disappeared. Blue, the dog, spent days prowling the room, crying softly at the door. Daniel resumed his routine. He returned to work, returned to grocery shopping, returned to movies on the couch, alone. Her absence filled every corner. But absence also teaches us. He didn't cry for long. He preferred to get up early, run in the park, resume life pragmatically. Until, little by little, something new emerged. He met someone on a weekend course, the kind you sign up for on impulse. She was a simple woman with a calm smile and eyes that seemed to listen before the words were even spoken. The connection was subtle, unassuming. But it was real. Over time, they became close. She didn't have Emily's quirks, nor the same way of expressing herself. But she was genuine. And that was all Daniel needed. That's how their love began to be rebuilt. Away from the noise. Away from the empty promises. Months later, Emily reappeared. She called him on his cell phone, which he rarely answered. He hesitated, but answered. Her voice on the other end trembled. She said she needed to see him, that she wanted to talk. He accepted. They met at a discreet coffee shop. When she arrived, she was thinner and haggard. Her sunken eyes betrayed sleepless nights. She sat across from him with cold hands, her gaze fixed on the untouched cup of coffee. She apologized. She said she'd made a mistake. That she'd gotten lost. That she was sorry. Daniel remained silent. Then she told him everything. The man she'd run away with that night, the stranger who seemed to offer excitement and freedom, was actually a ghost from the past. An ex-boyfriend of her sister's. Someone who had caused a deep wound in the family years before and with whom she'd promised never to get involved again. But she had. And it wasn't out of love. It was ego. Need. Impulse. He said he felt invisible in his marriage. That he'd begun to seek validation outside, in new eyes, in words she no longer heard at home. He'd confused desire with freedom. And lost everything. But the most devastating part came later. His sister found out. He discovered that Emily was in a relationship with the man who had betrayed and abandoned her years before. The betrayal wasn't just with Daniel. It was with his own sister. The family fell apart. His parents stopped talking to her. His sister cut ties. Friends drifted away. He said that, for the first time, he understood what loneliness was. That there was no one else. That he couldn't sleep. That he still dreamed of Sundays with coffee in bed, of TV shows on the couch, of blues barking when they hugged. That he would trade everything to go back. That he would give anything to retrace his steps. But he knew he couldn't. Daniel listened to her in silence. And then he said, with the serenity of someone who's cried enough, "What you want back no longer exists." She wept. She begged for a chance. She pleaded. But he no longer belonged to that past. She said there was someone by his side now. Someone who came not for what he could offer, but for who he was. Someone who chose him every day. And who, above all, respected him. Emily wept with her head bowed, tears falling onto the napkin she held in both hands. She said the pain wasn't just from losing him, but from realizing too late what he truly meant. He simply stood up. He said he forgave her. Not to start over. But to move on in peace. And before he left on the table the ring she had returned by text message months earlier. It wasn't a return. It was a full stop. Emily stood there, alone, with the cold cup and empty hands. She knew, in that moment, there was no going back. That the time she spent seeking excitement was the same time he spent building true love. That while she chased someone who made her feel desired, he became someone would truly desire. And perhaps the most painful part was knowing that, for the first time, she truly loved. And that this love came too late. Daniel never returned to that coffee shop after that day. He had ended not just a conversation, but an entire life cycle. When he left that table, he left behind not only a woman in tears, but the last ties to a past that, for so long, he had tried to keep standing alone. The decision to forgive her hadn't been easy, but it was necessary. Not because she deserved it, but because he needed to move on with a light touch. And the lightness he sought was only possible after closing the doors for good. He knew that if he stayed, there would be no future. Only a sad repetition of belated apologies and ghosts that would never allow a true new beginning. Emily, on the other hand, remained there, in the same place, for over an hour. Even after he left, she stared out the window, as if she could still see him crossing the street, as if there was still a chance to run and ask for another try. But there was no more time. There was no more them. What remained was the pain of a bad choice and the knowledge that not every regret comes with the right to do over. The following days were silent for Emily. She tried to distract herself with work, but lost focus. She tried to return to the places she used to frequent, but they all seemed to scream his absence. She tried to write messages she never sent. She even considered visiting his old house, but couldn't bring herself to do so. She received word from acquaintances that Daniel was happy. That his new relationship was calm and genuine. That the woman by his side was sweet, firm, and made him smile like he hadn't in a long time. Emily couldn't hate her. In fact, she couldn't feel anything but guilt. With each piece of information, each image, a mixture of envy and regret grew within her. Not from jealousy, but from the realization that this could have been hers. That this happy man was the same one she had left waiting for answers. Her sister, as expected, didn't reconnect. Her parents, though less strict, maintained a certain distance. Broken trust can't be rebuilt with words. Emily began living alone, in a small rented apartment, far from everything that reminded her of her previous life. She changed neighborhoods, her haircut, her routine. She tried to start from scratch, but every time she laid her head on the pillow, the memories came flooding back. The laughter on Sunday mornings, the movies watched under the blanket, the coffee made with care. Everything seemed just a touch away, yet it was untouchable. She missed even the small arguments, the routine, the comfortable silences. And, most of all, she missed being seen through the eyes Daniel saw her. Because now, no matter how close others got, no one's gaze held that same care. Everyone wanted something from her. No one knew her completely. And those who did, she pushed away. Daniel, in turn, allowed himself to experience something new with mature intensity. He learned that love doesn't need to be shouted to be felt. With his new partner, he found a way to love that didn't require constant proof or emotional games. It was a calm love, built on the foundation of daily choice. And this was his greatest security, knowing that, each morning, someone chose him with the same firmness that he chose that person. The wounds of the past didn't disappear, but they healed over time, with respect, with new gestures, with new memories. Soon, they decided to live together. And that house that once seemed empty now had life, voices, different smells. Blue, the puppy, seemed more lively, running around the house, barking when they arrived together, and sleeping happily between them. The pain Daniel once carried gave way to the serenity of someone who knows they've overcome something without losing their way. Months later, Emily saw him by chance in a restaurant. He was sitting with his new partner, laughing at something simple, perhaps a silly joke, perhaps a newly formed memory. She watched them from afar. She didn't try to get closer. She didn't have the strength. She realized there was no more space there. Not as a memory, not as a shadow. For the first time, she understood she'd lost everything. Not because it was taken from her, but because she'd given it away. She'd traded love for impulse. Trophy for attempt. Certainty for fleeting desire. And now, all that remained were distant memories and the bitter knowledge that no matter how many times she regretted it, Daniel would never return. Time passed, and each went their own way. Daniel thrived at work, kept friends close, and strengthened ties with the new family he was building. He became a more assertive, self-assured, and confident man. Emily, on the other hand, learned to live with silence. She began writing journals as a way to cope with her guilt. She sought therapy and understood her flaws, but the emptiness remained. Because there are mistakes that teach, yes. But there are also mistakes that leave a mark. And this one, she would carry forever. Over time, she tried to love again. But she always compared. No one seemed as present as Daniel. No one had his patience, his easy laugh, his attentive gaze. She tried to force connections that didn't exist, tried to build something on the rubble, but everything crumbled. It was as if her heart had been shaped to love only one man, and that man she herself had taken from her own life. Daniel remained steadfast, with the peace of someone who held no grudges. When they spoke of Emily, he didn't look away, but he also didn't dwell on the subject. She was part of history, but not the present. He kept an old photo, without anger. Just as proof that it all happened once. He didn't deny the past, but he also didn't dwell on it. His new life was full of small joys, cooking together, welcoming friends into his home, planning trips without hesitation, waking up next to someone who smiled when they saw him open their eyes. And so, the end came for each of them in their own way. For him, as a new beginning. For her, as a scar. A scar no one saw, but which burned every time she remembered the man who loved her like no other and who, even in the face of betrayal, was strong enough to forgive, but wise enough not to return. Because true love also knows when to walk away. If you've made it this far, comment below what you thought of this story. What was the moment that touched you most? Do you believe that some losses truly are irreversible? And if it were you, what would you do differently? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, stories like this are told to show how much our choices shape our destinies. To remind us that betrayal isn't entertainment, it's a wound that changes the course of entire lives. And here, on this channel, we don't support any kind of betrayal. Our goal is clear: to show the consequences, provoke reflection, and, perhaps, prevent someone from repeating the same mistakes. Let this story serve as a warning. Love isn't just what you feel, it's what you protect, what you care for, what you honor. Cheating isn't just breaking a pact, it's destroying the chance to experience something real. Because when someone chooses you every day, it's cowardly to turn your back for a momentary thrill. And sometimes, when regret sets in, there's no one waiting on the other side.